What is your name?
Riley.
Oh, you're Riley.
I'm
He's
Riley.
Riley?
He's Riley, and you are...
I think Kennedy.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure.
Why did Riley and Kennedy come to my place? Why, to get the chickens to cross the road. Alright, so, yeah, they're at my place. They're playing the first game in a 13-game run to win the Bag of Mediocrity. What I wanted to do with this is I wanted to start them off with the Atari and then work their way up through the decades up to modern-day PlayStation 4 type stuff. So what I began with was Freeway, a very simple game where you just push up until you've got more chickens across the road than the other person in a 2-minute period. That was a really good way to break the ice, get them to hate each other, and then keep playing. Speaking of Freeway, I think it's tough to say. I mean, everyone loves all the Activision games for Atari. They're all great. This one seems very like a game you wouldn't like. And I keep thinking about going, I don't like this game. I'd rather play Frogger. But when I actually sit down to play these games, I kind of spend more time with Freeway than Frogger. It's just faster, and the competition's so much higher since it's simultaneous 2-player, which I think is a big difference. You're just seeing it on an easy mode here where it's just regular little cars, but you can make it go a lot faster. There could be semi-trucks. You can have the difficulty set where if you get hit, you go right back to the beginning of the road. So it's a very simple game, but it's a very fun game, very competitive. And that's the point of all these games today. They're very competitive. And, you know, I found it kind of difficult to really pick up some really good, simple, competitive games that weren't really complicated. Because you don't want people to come over who've never played these games and then be confused as to what to do. You want to keep it simple so there's no 5 hours of explanation for each game. So this was a very good one to start with, I found. Now, the next game you're looking at is ice hockey. Now, I think of all the hockey games I have, and I have them spanning all the generations here, this might be the one I have the most fun with. A lot of people argue over which EA's NHL they go for. Usually I hear 94 on the Genesis. Mine is 95 on the Super Nintendo because it's my first, right? But this game is just 2 players, brutal. Once again, the simplicity is here. You control one character at a time. You move them to the goal, pass the puck, bounce it off the wall. It's kind of like a little bit more complicated Pong, but with body checking. And it's also the second Activision game that they're playing. Activision is just the go-to company for the Atari, isn't it? So they're playing this for a while. The points go on for a bit. I decided to leave the whole game on here, just in case you're interested in seeing it. Now, one of the reasons I like this game over the later hockey games is it's not a simulation. It's just a simple arcade-style game, like, say, I think NHL Hits is a good example on the PlayStation 1. Or I think there's a Mario hockey game on the Wii, the Mario Sports Mix. Later games, it's not simple. It's not just grab the puck and shoot it into the goal. There's a lot of maneuvers and techniques. But I think for the most part, the reason why people love these sports games, be it Madden or NHL or NBA, it's the rosters and the most up-to-date rosters. That's why they buy a new one every year for like the $70 these days, is so they can feel like they're playing the sports themselves, kind of predict the next season. And that's great. I'm just not a sports guy. Maybe you can tell by my physique that I'm not a sports guy, but maybe you can't. I'm in pretty decent shape, pretty swole. Well, my stomach is swollen with food, fat, whatever. So yeah, this game's going by pretty well. how I have these games set up is Riley's always player 1 and Kennedy's always player 2. Now, that doesn't make an effect on anything, but it was a nice agreement so that they'd always know from game to game which character they were. So there was no, wait, which one am I this time? And in this case, you can see that Kennedy's doing really well at the ice hockey. He's got a good grasp on it. I'm thinking he's just more in tune with the old classic Atari games where Riley was a bit more like probably struggling with the stick and the button. And the Atari takes a bit of a getting used to make it happen. Oh, look, the game's almost over. Just a few seconds to go. And there we go. It's I think Riley's really picking up near the end. I think really got a flow on it, but it was too late. So I do have one more Atari game I had them play, and there's not much I really can say about this. It's Pong. Well, it's not Pong. It's Video Olympics. Believe it or not, there's no actual game called Pong on the Atari 2600, even though Atari made Pong. I guess they wanted to make it sound complicated by calling it Olympics, but that's Pong. There's a lot of variations, and if you really use your imagination, you can picture the other Olympics. In this particular video, it was going on a long time, so I did a quick cut there to skip ahead to the later score, because it was a lot of back and forth. Oh, speaking of Atari, see that black line that's been going on the screen? That's just because I was filming straight from a camera on the TV. I am really looking forward to the Retron 77 by Hyperkin, because then I can have HD output using my real Atari cartridges. I'm excited for that. When it comes out, buying it straight up. I mean, sure, I could clean the contacts and all that, and I'm already using these little RF things instead of the switch boxes, but the Retron 77, that's what I'm going for. So after not Pong, we moved to the Nintendo, and as you can see, they're playing Urban Champion. Now this is a game that people just don't respect enough. I mean, what it is it's rock, paper, scissors. You attack high, you attack low, you attack weak, you attack strong. And then you block high and low. And you try to anticipate what the other person's doing and then try to get past their defenses. Very simple game. But it's really fun when you get into it. It looks dumb, no one seems to really care, but when you're actually playing it with another person, it's really fun, especially when you get them knocked into the sewer. What really is annoying, or fun annoying, is when you really have a lead on somebody or whatever, and then the police come by at some point, and then both of you walk to the far ends of the screen, getting rid of any progress either of you have made in that particular stage. Now, and here's another thing to talk about with the Atari and some of these early Nintendo games where it's very simple stuff. A lot of people just dismiss them as boring. But what you need is a second player, because old games are always about competing against another person. They're games, right? There has to be a winner. And so people play old games like they're new games. Like you're playing God of War, or even if you're playing like older games like Castlevania, where it's just one player versus the game, right? Player versus environment, whatever you want to call it for you kids. But when you're playing the old games, it's almost strictly two-player. You can practice with single player, or if it is mostly single player oriented, just take turns, and score is very important, and you just get the higher score than the other person. It's very competitive, and it adds a lot more context to these simple games. And a lot of people just play this game single player. They don't care about the score, because score is not really important in games these days. And they just don't see the draw out of context. So after Urban Champion, we obviously have moved on to Faceball 2000 on the Super Nintendo. Oh, actually, sorry, I talked right through it. There was a little blip of Mario Brothers there. I didn't do a lot of recording. And Kennedy obviously wasn't really doing so well at that one, as you can see by the score if you just scroll back a bit. But yeah, so Faceball 2000, as a kid, and this is going back to context again, this game was something I always wanted. Playing it now, though, it's not so good. Frame rates and slow movements, and I have no idea why they don't have a strafing feature in this game. It would have been so welcome. But with the context of back in the day, I mean, you didn't have first-person shooters on your Super Nintendo. I mean, not right away. I mean, later Wolfenstein and Doom came in, but this was a huge thing. However, and I don't have this myself, but I hear Faceball on the Game Boy is actually more fun. Maybe it has a better frame rate or something with it being just simple green and black graphics, but with this one, without the strafing and everything, it's really tough, especially in single-player mode. But it's still fun, but mostly if you have a nostalgia for this sort of thing. I can't imagine too many current-gen gamers going back and being excited for it. And this is another game where I kind of skipped ahead because it was taking a long time, and looks like Kennedy took this one home, didn't he? Got all the faces. Yeah. Now the next game that's coming up right away is Uniracers. Now, I left all 3 matches on here. I could have just skipped ahead and or just cut it down a bit, but I don't feel people know enough about Uniracers, and it looks very, very simple. But when I first saw it on Video and Arcade Top 10, which was a great TV show in the 90s. Well, great because I didn't have internet, so that was my source of video game stuff. So it was just a fantastic looking game, really fast, lots of stunts, competitive again. But they had to stop selling it. I believe the story goes that Pixar got a little grumpy that Nintendo had used this unicycle with personality, which was kind of similar to one of their shorts they made before they even made Toy Story. And so Nintendo had to stop selling this game. Now, I can't remember the number. I think it was like 300,000, 100,000 games were made and released. But I don't think you can get this on any eShop or anything on Nintendo Digital stuff, and I could be wrong about that. But if it's not, it probably won't be because of that lawsuit that happened with Pixar. So all you people need to probably pick up this game and then learn why Pixar was a big meanie to you guys, denying you such a fantastic experience with a Super Nintendo racer that's really great. Another great game just like this, it kind of almost has the same kind of aesthetic, the kind of plasticky cartoon light attitude kind of fun, is Stunt Race FX. That was a great game too. Bad frame rate, but really fun. That's something to think about. Bad frame rate with Stunt Race FX with the FX chip. But if the FX chip had been in Faceball 2000, I bet we'd have a lot smoother game because those graphics were a lot simpler. I think if we had strafing and the FX chip in Faceball 2000, that would have been a game that you would never hear the end of. I think it would have been a huge system seller for the time, because once again, we didn't have a lot of first-person shooters. Uniracers here, what they're doing is they're doing a couple races on different tracks, using some names I had already saved on the battery on this, and yes, it has a battery, it saves your scores. The third part of this is stunts. And I forgot that there was even stunts in this game, like stunt tracks where it's all about getting points. But it's a really neat thing. Like the game, it's so simple. The graphics are basic. You got a checkerboard pattern background, which not very creative, but it adds the sense of speed. I mean, we don't have blast processing on the Super Nintendo, so we got to make up for that with simple graphics, right? So here we go with the stunts. Let's see what they're doing. Now, Riley's on top, player 1, right? And Kennedy's on the bottom, player 2. And it looks like they're taking two absolutely different approaches to this. Riley's doing this Twister City move over and over again, which is getting him quite a few points. And Kennedy is doing these flips, but it seems like he has a lot of crashes too, but the flips aren't worth a lot of points. Neither of them were really experimenting with all the different buttons on the controller, because a lot of different kind of moves too, and I think you could rack up a lot higher score than what you're seeing here. But it looks like the score is almost done. It looks like Riley's taking the victory there. Because I think this is the best 2 out of 3 is what we were doing. And they had to do the third tiebreaker. Now, we've moved on to Rock and Roll Racing. Now, this is the Genesis version. See, this is another example of context. Now, back in the day, I would have preferred to have the Super Nintendo one. The Genesis has an extra track or two, racing track, but also an extra track or two of songs. However, the Super Nintendo's songs sound better. Now, back then, that was a huge difference because, like, oh, this sounds more like the real song, and the Genesis is just some whatever tuny sounding stuff. And nowadays, that doesn't make a difference at all because you just listen to the real song on Spotify, or if you have the CD, it sounds great. You don't have to worry about, getting your music on a Super Nintendo game. So now I'd prefer to have the Genesis with the extra features than the Super Nintendo's higher sound quality. And also the Genesis one is cheaper, so that's a huge reason why I wanted the Genesis version. But it's a really fun game. It looks like RC Pro-Am with its kind of 3D-ish kind of look to it, and you got your same win money, build up your car, weapons, kart racing type of thing.